Well, it's a rainy morning here at Monarch, and I wanted to talk about creativity, and specifically about talking about creativity. So, I'm working with a new artist, and I've come into this situation numerous times where they want to talk about making the art instead of actually making the art. And this is a common pitfall, I would say. It's a common pitfall to think about making I would put it in the same bucket as thinking about making the art, talking about making the art, uh, organize, walking around making the art. There's always a reason to not step into the creative process, and it's always fear. It's always just this little avoidance, hesitation, because it's scary. We make ourselves vulnerable when we step into the creative process. And so it's for this reason that I typically don't like talking about music especially when we should be making the music. And it can become seductive and it can feel productive and sometimes it is obviously when we're in the work, it can be very productive to talk about the work, analyze the work, talk about what we're feeling. But when we're not in the work, it's rarely productive to talk about the work more than just the logistics of when are we going to get together and get in the work, make the work. What did we learn from making the work, and what are we going to do next time to make the work better? But as a music producer, part of my job is to be a Sherpa and to guide people into the process of uncovering their soul and sharing themselves and being real and being authentic. And often talking about doing those things can become a substitute for actually doing those things. So I wanted to come on here and just put a flag in the sand and say, if you've been talking about making art for a long time, the real juice of life is actually getting past the barrier of hesitation and the barrier of procrastination and the barrier of analysis and the barrier of over planning and buying more gear for is another good one, and actually getting on the court of the artist, which is getting into the studio and making something. It could literally just be a line on a piece of paper. Because once you have that first line on a piece of paper, or a line of lyrics, or one chord, or even one note, once you have that, you are now on the court. You have entered into the creative process and you are creating, and now you have the opportunity to actually be in the creative process. And one thing that I'm just endlessly fascinated about is how intricately related the creative process and the process of healing, and at the same time the process of discovering our soul or getting intimately connected with our soul, they're all so intimately creative. I think about it as like a flower blossoming. It's like as the flower blossoms, it is simultaneously an act of creativity in that there is now a flower where there wasn't a flower before. And it's also an act of becoming and transforming. And I think that's why I love the creative process so much, because we get to see people transform and blossom, and we get to do it joyfully in the creative process, the process of making music or making any other kind of art. So there's value to being on the court, and luckily for me, I get to live a lot of my life on the court, which is great. I get to work with people who are stepping into their creative gifts. I also get to step into my own creativity and try to do that on a daily basis. And of course, I also notice myself hesitating. There's all kinds of hesitation and resistance that pop up constantly that needs to be managed. But I do want to give props for everyone who is getting on the court and getting into the process. And once you jump into the pool, it's fun and it's refreshing and it's a whole different experience. And I think that's my favorite metaphor, is it's the difference between standing on the side of the pool talking about what it might be like to be in the pool and just jumping in the pool. It's scary to jump in. It's shocking sometimes to jump in, but once you're in, you come up and you shake the water off your head. It's a completely different experience than being on the side of the pool. And there's so much life available in art and in creativity. And there's so much joy available. So if you've been talking about it, if you've been standing on the side of the creative pool, I wanted to come on this rainy morning here at Monarch and say, jump in. Jump in. The water is delicious and refreshing. And you will be glad that you did, because things will start to open in you and in your life that you had a feeling you wanted to open, but you didn't quite know how to open. And by jumping onto the court, jumping into the pool, whatever metaphor you want to use, it tends to open up and break up and loosen up these stuck parts of ourselves that then get to be expressed, get to be reintegrated, get to be recombobulated. And I've seen it so many times, and it's so beautiful. It's one of my favorite things to witness. So if you are staring at some sort of creative endeavor that has been on your mind, on your heart for a while, this is my morning message to say, why not go for it today? Put a line on a piece of paper, put a word or a line of words down in your journal, play a chord, and sing something over it. You will be glad you did. All right, Will Sage signing off. See you next time.